Welcome to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Right. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone, and tonight we have the good fortune to be joined by one of the members of our freelance staff, Andrew Guindon. Andrew, how are you this evening?
I'm doing good. I'm happy coming off of a nice win yesterday for the Pats. I'm excited to talk about it. How are you guys doing?
Good. Good.
Doing
We're
good.
excited to talk about it too. But before we do that, I do want to remind you that if you are in the market to purchase your first home or sell your current home and purchase your next home, give our good friend Herb Devine a call at 781-254-2846, or you can email him at herb@mortgageright.com. With over 27 years of experience, Herb has the knowledge and the know-how that you need to get you through the purchasing process. If you're looking to refinance, Herb does hundreds of refinances a year, if not thousands. He can help you refinance as well. Again, give him a call at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. Of course, yesterday, the New England Patriots, we're going to start there, picking up kind of an unexpected 25-22 win over the New York Jets. I say unexpected because I think most people thought that while they would be competitive in this game, that they would probably lose. They surprised a lot of us by playing well, especially after Drake May went down with a concussion in the second quarter and pulling out the win late over the Jets, preventing a Jets sweep, which would have been the first time they swept the Patriots in the season since the year 2000. Andrew, were you around in 2000?
I was not.
You were not, so it's been that long. So obviously this is a big win for the Patriots. I mean, they're 2-6, so it's interesting because on the one hand, it's a big win because they get a win and they feel good about themselves and it's something that they can build on. But on the other hand, there's still the hard reality that they're a 2-6 football team. It appears that Drake May is in concussion protocol. It's too early to tell whether or not he'd be out of protocol to play this week. If I were a betting man and a guessing man, I would say probably not. The other thing that's interesting here, of course, is that they did make a trade today. And I think this could be the beginning of a possible fire sale with the NFL trade deadline a couple weeks away. They traded edge Joshua Uche to the Kansas City Chiefs for a 2026 sixth-round pick. But before we talk about that and the potential availability of May, let's talk a little bit about yesterday's game from the standpoint of takeaways. And Kevin, I'm going to start with you, and Andrew, I'm going to go with you next. Just three takeaways from yesterday as you think about the game and the Patriots picking up a much-needed win.
Yeah, biggest one for me, and we talked about this yesterday on the post-game show, is they didn't quit. That's a spot where they can easily roll over, and you can have a 1-7 team. And John, you put it, I think, better than I did yesterday. They didn't quit for Mayo, maybe more specifically. Still playing for him. I'm not sure any of us knew that was going to be the case going in, just given how kind of chaotic that last week was. So the fact that they didn't quit yet and will still have a season or at least competitive games going forward is most important. For me, takeaway two is obviously Drake. He did tweet or post on Instagram. I'm not sure how long ago. I just saw it before we came on air, but he commented blessed. So maybe he already knows he'll be better off than we think. That protocol is going to take at least, you got to think till Friday. I think there's 5 or 6 steps that they have to go through. So we'll see. Look, I don't think it's a big deal if he plays or not. At this point, every single game, if you win, great. If not, there's some draft implications there. So you don't have to rush him back if he's not fully ready to go, especially with a head injury. And then lastly, I'm trying to think, just in general, the defense, I thought they stepped up to the challenge that Mayo laid out for them this week. John, you've been a coach. Calling football players soft is the worst thing you can say to a guy in a locker room. So nice to see him bounce back and have some professional pride there. Look, you said it. It's not a massive win. It's not going to springboard them to the playoffs or anything like that. But again, at the very least, they're competitive, they're professional, and we'll see them, again, compete in every game this year, I think, which I'm not sure we knew before yesterday.
Yeah, I think it's definitely gonna be hard for Drake May to come back just because of all of the rules and regulations they have in place now with the concussion protocol. But on the other hand, you did see Marvin Harrison Jr. a couple weeks ago come back within that same week from a concussion that he suffered the previous Sunday. But we'll see how that goes. I thought Jacoby Brissett did a really good job filling in, and I was a little surprised by how much they resorted to the passing game in that second half, just based off of how committed they were to the run with Brissett under center, and just how the overall the passing game was a little lackluster before May stepped in. He kind of helped unlock that part of the offense for them. But like you said, Kevin, the defense really stepped up too. That's been really iffy for them uh, throughout the season so far, especially that run defense. They stepped up a bit. Pass defense, you didn't want to see Garrett Wilson kind of not light them up, but he did a really good job against Marcus Jones. But there's only so much that little Marcus Jones can do against Garrett Wilson when he's lined up man to man on him. But yeah, defense overall stepped up, and I think that was a great win for the culture, and especially for Gerard Mayo. Looking out towards the future, I do think it was a bigger win externally than internally. Just there's a lot of media heads talking about Gerard Mayo's soft comments, and I mean he knows his team better than anyone else does right now, and I think he he knows how to handle them, and I think he did the right thing. And it was just kind of taken out of proportion, but yeah, I think it was a win externally as well.
Yeah, I think it was a big win for them regardless, just because I think they needed it. And right when things are going as bad as they've been going of late, you need a win to kind of to change the mindset of the players, to make the coaches feel better about their players and the situation. So it's amazing with the power, especially in football. You're not playing multiple times a week like you do in these other sports. In football, I've always felt that a win, and I've coached other sports, but I've always felt that a win felt a little bit more special than it does in other sports, because it's just you're playing once a week, you're playing that opponent once, maybe twice a year in this case with divisional opponents. But I just feel that those wins mean a little bit more in football than they do in other sports. It's not to say that winning doesn't matter in other sports, because obviously it does. But certainly for the Patriots, this had to have felt good. In terms of three takeaways for me, one, I think that the Patriots did a great job of responding and showing resiliency after a hard week where they had to answer questions about their coach and the soft comment. So, you know what? There were questions if this team was going to quit on Mayo, would they play for him? I think they answered those questions. They proved that they're willing to play for him and that they believe in this coaching staff. And Kevin, you and I talked to several players in the locker room yesterday, and to a man, they haven't given up on this coaching staff. They still believe in them. They're still buying in. And I think that's important. I'm not sure that message was delivered enough today. And no, we're not trying to be hokey pokey feel good here. I'm being honest with you. This is what the players told us. Yes, you can make the argument that, well, what do you expect? That's what the players are going to say. I understand that. But again, if things weren't going as well, that's probably a question that they may not have answered the way they did, or they may not have answered it at all.
Yeah.
Second takeaway for me, but real quick, second takeaway from me is Drake May. Again, you know what? You knew that this was a possibility when he was inserted into the starting lineup a couple weeks ago. You don't like to see it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I think he's playing reckless, but the bottom line is when you're putting the ball down and taking off as much as he is, it was inevitable. Unfortunately, Sherwood, I don't think he intentionally went helmet to helmet with him. It was just the angle that he had taken to tackle May. They probably should have thrown a 15-yarder there, and he definitely should have been taken off the field. We talked about this yesterday, Kevin. It blows me away that the independent neurologist spotter didn't see that, radio down to the white hat and say, hey, stop the game. We got to get him off. That I'm sure the league is going to look into. And finally, the performance of the defense. I mean, they had gotten run through the last 3 weeks by the Dolphins, by the Jaguars, and they stepped it up, and they proved that, you know what, the veteran guys in that locker room that have been on this team for a long time, they have a lot of pride. They're proud people. They proved that they still have what it takes. And in many ways, they validated what Bill Belichick said about them during the week last week, that they are good enough to step up and stop the run. They held the Jets to 122 total yards rushing. So it was a nice performance. It was good to see the defense bounce back.
Yeah, just a couple of things to follow up on what you said. As far as what the players said yesterday, for me in particular, it was about Alex Van Pelt. He's taken a ton of crap, and I wrote this on the site last night and kind of retweeted it this morning. I thought the three different players, Keishon Boutte, Ben Brown, and Darian Lowe, and to a man, they all threw support behind Alex Van Pelt. Ben Brown said he loves his scheme. Darian Lowe says he instills a ton of confidence in the players. And Keishon Boutte, first of all, good for the staff and for Brissett for going back to him in a big spot and showing him they can trust him. But good for him for rewarding that trust as well late in the game in a huge spot. But his comment was interesting. He said, "No, it's taking time for us to trust each other, and each other being Van Pelt and the players." He said it's his job to call the plays, but it's our job to execute. And if we don't execute, he can't trust us. So there's a symbiotic relationship that's still growing there, and it's going to continue to grow with a first-year coordinator. And then the hit on May, I can't believe that nobody saw it. You mentioned it, John. And even Gerard Mayo today said he was surprised when he was told by Jim Whalen, the doctor, that he had to come off the field because he threw two passes after that. So nobody saw it, apparently. We saw it in real time. I looked at you and said, he has a concussion. As soon as it happened, you could see he was struggling to get up or taking time to get up. So, a complete whiff there.
Well, I mean, there are phones in the press box. Why didn't you call down? You sound like you're an independent neurologist.
Well, no, but I mean, a lot of people saw it. You could tell just the way he struggled to get up. Right.
I will, in all seriousness, I didn't pay any attention to him, so I didn't see anything that would lead me to believe he was concussed. In fact, when people were talking about the fact that he had gone into the blue tent, I was like, for what? I didn't think that the hit was that violent. I certainly did not think he was concussed.
No, so I didn't think the hip was bad either, but he stayed down for a while, and you kind of saw him, kind of shake his head a little bit. That old cliche, shaking the cobwebs out. I don't know. It was definitely a miss, but the first point about the players and playing for the coaching staff, not just Mayo, I think is important, and I think there's a level of trust now that's being developed between Van Pelt and the offensive guys, no matter who's a quarterback.
Yeah, I think another thing with Van Pelt, I know you said he gets a lot of criticism, and you can criticize him however you want, but I do think he deserves his flowers for how he's handled Drake May's development so far. Him, McAdoo, and McCartney have done a really good job as what it seems so far with May's development. I just wanted to add that because I think he deserves his flowers for that.
Yeah, look, I don't think he's in the best situation. I mean, you got to remember they've had 7 different offensive line combinations this season. They've had injuries. Ramondre Stevenson misses a game. David Andrews is out for the year. They're struggling at wide receiver. They just got Kendrick Bourne back a couple of weeks ago. So there's been a lot that has happened there that he's had to work through. Now, I think he's been an inconsistent play caller. I don't think he's done a good job week in and week out. I think their game planning reflects that. I think the performance of the offense reflects it. And I do think ultimately he's going to need to do a better job because while we can sit here and say, okay, he's doing a good job of developing Drake May, ultimately he's paid to score points. And yes, a big part of the evaluation of his tenure here is going to center around the development of Drake May. People are also going to be looking for this offense to show improvement as the year goes on. And right now, they scored 25 yesterday against a good Jets defense, but they're going to need to take another step next week, regardless of who's under center, whether it's May or Brissett, and show that they can score 28-plus points against a defense that gave up 52 yesterday and has been pretty generous this season. So I think you can give him a solid grade so far for the development of Drake May, probably a B. But overall, I'd probably give him a C-. I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there. I think the problem with this Shanahan-McVay modern West Coast offense is everybody's running the same concepts. Everybody's running the same plays. I think that schematically, when you run that system, you're easy to defend in many ways, unless you do what Shanahan does in San Francisco, where they motion and move a lot. We haven't seen a ton of that from them. So there's a lot left to be desired, and I'd like to see more out of this offense. And again, I think that his tenure here will be marked by the development of Drake May, but also how much success they have. Speaking of Drake May, I want to move to that topic real quick. I know we've been talking about it, but do you play him on Sunday if he's cleared?
If he's cleared, yeah. But I make sure he is fully, ready to go. There is no need to rush him back. And I mentioned this last night. If they want to tank without admitting they're tanking, well, you now have an out. You can say, hey, Drake still wasn't right. We didn't want to risk it. He has a future to look after. So you can kind of sneaky go lose games with Jacoby Brissett, and the fan base can't really get that pissed because you have the concussion to fall back on. So it's a sneaky, nice little spot for the team to be in. Yeah, but if he's cleared to play him and you keep letting him develop, but if he's not cleared, well, I mean, obviously, if he's not cleared, he's not going to play. But even if he doesn't feel right, if he is cleared, I hold him out.
Yeah, I think it really depends on just how he's progressing through the week. It sounded like, according to Gerard Mayo, he was talking about it today. Just he thought Drake May could go back in there and May wanted to go back in there. Not like jumping to conclusions or anything, saying that it's like only a minor thing, but like I said earlier with the Marvin Harrison Jr. thing, maybe it's really not that bad and it's more just precautionary. Because I think he also added that the league kind of forced him out of the game there on Sunday. So it really just depends on how he's progressing through the weekend. I bet Mayo will talk a little bit more about that eventually.
Yeah, I don't. And well, one thing that I think is important to keep in mind here is that it's not actually in the team's hands. Obviously, these independent neurologists have to give him a clean bill of health, and once they do, then the team has to give him a clean bill of health, and once the team does, then the coaching staff can proceed from there. But it's not 100% in the hands of the team here. He has to get cleared by the independent neurologist first, and then team doctors and trainers, and then the team ultimately makes a decision. It's hard for me because part of me feels like protect him. This is a game you could probably win with Brissett as your starter, if not be competitive in. But part of me feels if he's been cleared, you play him. You don't want to hinder his development either. You want him to keep playing. But again, it'll depend. I mean, you also have to think about his long-term future here. I think that that's an important part to all this is that you got to do what's right for him. Remember, he just turned 22. He's still young. So you have to think about his future and is it worth rushing him back or even playing him a week after a concussion? Are you better off holding him out until the Chicago game the following week? We'll see how it plays out. My guess is if he's healthy to play and he's cleared, he'll play. But if he doesn't practice this week and it's up in the air by Friday, I think they'll downgrade him to out, and I think you'll see him the following week in Chicago. Speaking of the Tennessee Titans, they arguably may be worse than the Patriots right now. They gave up 52 points yesterday in a 52-14 loss to the Detroit Lions. This is a winnable game on paper. I mean, can the Patriots win this game? Tennessee went all in this offseason, hired a brand new head coach in Brian Callahan, spent a ton of money in free agency. They fortified the offensive line in the draft. They thought that they could contend this year and close the gap in the AFC South between them and the Texans. That has not been the case. They've been awful. Is this a game we can check off as a win for the Patriots on Sunday?
Well, check off as a win, no, but you said it. It's very winnable. They should be in this game up until the fourth quarter, if not ahead for most of it. No matter who's the quarterback, Jacoby Brissett should be able to handle the Tennessee Titans. And speaking of Van Pelt, it's a big weekend for him. Again, Detroit just scored 52. I know you don't have the talent that Detroit has, but can he give me 28 against this defense? Like, they should be able to score some points against Tennessee. And on the flip side, Will Levis doesn't scare you or shouldn't really. And Calvin Ridley hasn't been what they thought he was going to be either. So, yeah, you should be walking into Tennessee believing you can win, especially after the way you just came from behind yesterday. I know the Jets are down, but that's the kind of game that does maybe not springboard you into a winning streak, but it can springboard you into 1 or 2 in a row.
Yeah, I do think that this will be a competitive game, and this can be a nice game to kind of build off of and gain some momentum, starting a little win streak with 2 games in a row. I think that they can really get going on the offensive and defensive end, continuing to build off of the much better performance on Sunday than we've seen from in past weeks from the defense, especially with that Titans offense so far. I mean, Christian Gonzalez has the ability to completely wipe out a team's top receiver. He can do that against Calvin Ridley. I mean, we saw that against Devontae Adams, which is just crazy. It shows how good Gonzalez can really be. And also on the offensive end, their defense has been really inconsistent, and it might be a good week to try and get the run game going, which is shut down since the first couple weeks of the season, where it was really the main focal point of your offense. And maybe you try and expand the passing game a little bit with Jacoby Brissett. So I do think that they can really build off of this game if they do come away with a win.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think that after last week, where people openly questioned if this team could win more than one game, and people started comparing them to the 1990 Patriots, I think if they all of a sudden come out of Tennessee on Sunday with a win and they've won 2 in a row and now they've won 3 games, now all of a sudden the 5-12, 6-11 talk is back on the table. I don't buy that this team can win another 3 games, even if they win on Sunday. You never know. I think the schedule is tough. There are a couple of games there that they could potentially be competitive in and win. But if you win Sunday, look, and this team's going to play with more and more confidence. That'll help them down the road. They go to Chicago the following week, and then they have the LA Rams come to town on November 17th. So, anything's possible, as Kevin Garnett once taught us. But at the end of the day, I do think that a win here would be big for this football team if they can make it 2 in a row, and it certainly, if nothing else, would help build confidence. Thoughts on the Uche trade? I don't think anybody was surprised. He was a healthy scratch yesterday. I think it was abundantly obvious he was going to be moved. Were you surprised that he was moved, and what are your thoughts on the compensation?
No, but I was surprised what they got. 2026, it's the 6th rounder isn't surprising, but 2 years from now, I thought they could have got a little bit more. But disappointing ending to his career here. He had some local ties. You guys, John, and Andrew, I'm not sure if you know, but he was close with Chris Merritt, the Bryant head coach, and obviously played for Don Brown at UMass. I enjoyed covering him. He was always very good to us, but just it never materialized on the field, even under Belichick. I thought Mayo might give him sort of a breath of fresh air coming in, but it just, again, it never really worked out, and his numbers sort of back up. He was a pass rusher only by the time he ended up leaving here, and really his entire career here. So good player. I hope he, does well in Kansas City, but for whatever reason, it just never worked here.
Yeah, I mean, dating back to 2022, I mean, playing opposite of Matthew Judon, that's obviously going to give you some good opportunities to get 11 and a half sacks in a season. But since then, he's kind of just dialed back. I mean, we saw even last year a decent reduction in his snap count and his just overall involvement in the defense. And we saw that again this season. He was basically a non-factor the past few weeks, and he was a healthy scratch on Sunday. So, I mean, we all kind of saw this coming, like you said. But I'm not too shocked at what they got in return for him. Obviously, it would have been nice to get a pick this year, like a 6th-rounder this year. But I mean, that's his value at this point. He's, like I said, not really been too much of a factor, and he's also in a contract year. So I don't think you're really going to get anything much for him at all. But I do think being in Kansas City, that's a good opportunity for him to kind of get back on his feet and kind of restart his career a little bit. I think it's good for both sides.
Yeah, I don't think the value was there. I talked to a couple of people today that reached out to me and said, were you surprised by what they got for him? And I said, no. I think we have to be realistic that if the Patriots do in fact fire sale this thing in a couple of weeks, I don't expect huge returns here. I mean, I think what we may see or we may perceive a player's value to be on this roster right now and what the league sees are vastly different. They're two different things. And I think at the end of the day, if you're Kansas City, this is a great deal for them. They give up a 6th-round pick in 2 years. They get a guy who at one point 2 years ago finished with 11 and a half sacks, has over 20 sacks for his career. I think he'll be a nice fit there as a situational pass rusher. The other thing you got to keep in mind, and you guys mentioned this, he's a free agent at the end of the season. I mean, teams are not going to overpay for a guy that they're more than likely going to let walk. I mean, let's face it, if Uche produces in Kansas City, he's probably going to get a deal somewhere else and get the bag. So for him, it's really about going to Kansas City, competing for a Super Bowl, winning a Super Bowl, and then go out and get paid one last time in your career. So it'll be interesting. I think at the end of the day, I'm not surprised they traded him. I think it's the first shoe to drop. There's going to be several more shoes to drop here in the next week or so. I do think it hurts him on the field because you're losing a guy who was probably your purest pass rusher on the roster. You don't have that anymore. And so I do think that it'll hurt him there a little bit. But the bottom line is he had 2 sacks this season. He wasn't producing. The snaps weren't there for him to produce at a higher level. I think this was expected. He was going to get moved eventually. It happened today. And you know, Kevin, you and I have been around Uche. We've covered him. He's a good guy, gentleman, professional, answers questions, doesn't really dance around things. I think he'll be missed in that locker room. He was well respected by guys, and you mentioned local ties. Of course, he played for Bryant head coach Chris Merritt at Christopher Columbus High School in Florida, and he played for current UMass coach Don Brown at Michigan. So, you know, obviously he's got some connections here. But, yeah, he'll be missed. But I think at the end of the day, this is only the beginning. I still think there are 2 or 3 other veterans on this roster that at some point they're going to move because it's really about having as many picks in the vault as possible to use to move around over the next few years to rebuild this roster. You are watching / listening to the New England Football Show presented by Mortgage Rate. I'm your host, John Serenitas. As always, I'm joined by my partner, Kevin Stone. And tonight we are joined by NEFJ staff writer and also Patriots connoisseur. He's also written a bunch of Patriots stuff for Patriot blogs. Andrew Guindon joins us this week as well. Just a reminder, if you are in the market to sell your current home or purchase your first home, or next home, I should say, then give our good friend Herb Devine a call, 781-254-2846. You can also shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He and his team are available anytime, including nights and weekends. And if you're considering refinancing, well, Herb has done a ton of refis. He can help you out with that as well. Again, give him a call at 781-254-2846 or shoot him an email at herb@mortgageright.com. He's available all the time. And trust me when I tell you that, he's available all the time. He will get back to you pretty quickly. So reach out. Tell him we sent you. All right, gentlemen, let's talk some college football here. Another big weekend. Of course, it was week 9 in this college football season. Another big weekend of college action here in New England in the Division I ranks. Kevin, I'm going to start with the game you were at on Friday night. Boston College, disappointing loss to Louisville. They blew a 3-score lead in the game. Louisville storms back to beat the Eagles in a game that it looked like they had in the bag in the third quarter, but defense falls apart. Offense can't get key first downs when they need them to put the game away. Boston College loses yet again. They have a bye this week, but they dropped to 4-4, and this is probably their worst loss of the season.
Oh, it absolutely is. It's one of the worst losses they've had in 3 or 4 years at least. Student section showed up again. Bill O'Brien had pled with them all week. Please show up early, get in the building early. There was an atmosphere there again, and as usual, well, I should say, as has been the case for the last 4 years, at home, the fans go home disappointed. They're a mess right now. There is no downfield passing game whatsoever. John, I've been on the quarterback situation pretty much since August. I don't believe they have a guy that can elevate them and will get them to that next level or get the ball downfield. And Tommy, phenomenal athlete. I just don't believe that he's a great quarterback, but it's more than that. Defense gave up. I'm looking right now, 461 yards. We've talked all year about BC needing to run the ball. They had 154, but it didn't. It wasn't what it's usually been. for them is what I'm trying to say. So with the receivers that they have, this offense should be much, much better. I think it's a combination of the coaching staff just not really being sure how to use certain guys, and again the quarterback situation. Defensively, it's look, and I know injuries shouldn't be an excuse, but a lot of their top guys have been out, and you just don't have no depth at linebacker either. So I'm not sure how much better it can get. They right now it looks like 6-6 for BC, just because you still have Syracuse on the schedule, and you still have I'm trying to think.
You still
You
have
have
Pitt,
Syracuse,
SMU,
yeah. Jesus, thank you.
Syracuse, North Carolina. I mean, those are
Right. So I
tough
think it's a
games.
two. I think that's a 2-2 schedule if
3
you
of their
want,
last 4 are at home.
which is their only kind of saving grace right now. So there's a very good chance they don't make a bowl game unless things turn around quickly. So a well-timed second bye, although they just had one 2 weeks ago. So I'm not really sure how much self-scouting you can do after 2 weeks. Usually you have that build up to kind of get a big sample size, but you just went through all that self-scouting. So I'll be curious to see how they treat the bye. And one other thing, their special teams unit is brutal. They do not have a Division One punter on this roster, and the return game has been non-existent, which is strange because last week O'Brien told us, it's been emphasized in practice. McGowan fielded at least 4 kickoffs at either their own 5 or 10, and just fair caught them. Didn't even try to have a return the other night. So special teams has been a huge letdown. Um, Ultimately, and John, you've been on this for a long time. I just don't think they're as talented as a lot of people thought they might be. But even still, they should not be 4-4. This should be at least a 5-win team right now. So they're a mess, and they got to get it figured out quickly.
You guys know college football much better than I do, but at least to me, it looks like they had a promising start to the season. They got that nice win over FSU, Michigan State as well, but they've kind of just crumbled the last few weeks. Kevin, you hit on a lot of the things that they've had issues with and that they need to improve. But obviously, tough schedule coming up. You hope that they can get some wins out here at the end of the season and just look better to recruits who they're trying to get right now. Really just looking for a better end to the year than it's gone.
Yeah,
so far.
and it's interesting. And to your point, Andrew, when you look at the rest of their schedule, and Kevin, I don't think it's a false alarm to say that they may not make a bowl game. I mean, you got to go, your 1 away games at SMU, who's ranked. You got to go to Dallas and play them. You got to play a ranked Pitt team at home. You got to play a good Syracuse team at home. And then you got to play North Carolina, who's no gimme. They went on the road this week and whacked Virginia. So, yeah, I don't know if there's 2 wins there. I really don't. I mean, they, in my estimation, you got to figure the 2 most winnable games are Syracuse and North Carolina. But you're probably going to have to upset Pitt and or SMU to get in. And it's crazy to think, but 6-6 probably punches your ticket to the Armed Forces Bowl or the Fenway Bowl. And it's where this program has been for a long time. And we were told at the beginning of the year, when the hype was through the roof about this program, that Bill O'Brien's building a monster. Well, he's back in the lab because we're not unveiling Frankenstein this year, folks. They are what they are. And I don't know if any coach can change the culture at that program when it comes to success. Look, ultimately, it comes down to recruiting players, right? You could say whatever you want about Jeff Hafley as a coach. I thought he could have done a better job at times on the field, but they recruited their asses off. They brought in talent. Bill O'Brien can do that, but it's got to translate on the field. And I still think you got to bring in the right people. Well, in this era of NIL and the portal, Boston College will be an attractive school because of the academics and the future career opportunities. But to big-time former 4- and 5-star guys, that doesn't matter as much. They care more about the NFL development, and they care more about getting the bag now in college. And so I think, to me, it's disappointing because at the beginning of the year, at one point, they were ranked 24th in the country. We forget that the first 3 weeks of the season, they were nationally ranked. They go out to Missouri, go toe-to-toe with Mizzou, lose because, again, the defense implodes down the stretch. And from that point on, they beat Michigan State. They barely beat Western Kentucky. and they've lost 3 in a row since, and they have not looked like the same team. And again, I think you're staring at another 6-6 at best, 7-5 season. But gentlemen, I got to be honest with you, I don't see them winning 3 out of their last 4. I mean, this team is on a legitimate slide right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. Like I said, if they can somehow find a way to split these last 4, they'll get a bowl bid. But 6-6, 7-5, it's not going to be good enough for Bill O'Brien, and it shouldn't be good enough for anybody there anymore. It's just the same old, and it needs to change. This program needs to change. And we're seeing a lot of the same things with the other Division I programs too, specifically UMass, which we'll get to in a sec after Stone blesses us with more of his Boston College knowledge.
All right, fine. I won't. Never mind. No, look.
Did I hurt Kevin's feelings?
No, but you mentioned change. Will Bill O'Brien, make some staff changes? Because I think it's in order. If they don't make a bowl, I should say.
I think it's a fair question, especially on defense. And again, I don't like to talk about guys' job security and their job status. I don't. I hate it.
No, but I think it needs to be brought up at the end of the year. And look, you can make the argument that, Will Walling has been disappointing in terms of putting guys in position. Again, I still think that receiver room and running back room is as good as any. Well, I shouldn't say as good as any, but one of the better ones in the ACC, particularly the receiver room. And it's been disappointing all year long. Like a guy like Jerand Bradley or Jaden Skeet even, who we covered, for years here at CM, or even Lewis Bond, who's been disappointing this year. Those guys are non-existent. So, look, Will Walling has been one of Bill O'Brien's guys for the last 13 years, but he's
not going to make a change there.
No, I don't think so either. But overall, my point is there's going to be some tough conversations that need to be had, and I do think quarterback is one of them. I can't trust it.
But at some point, again, I don't want to sound cliche when I say this, but it really is about players, and coaches are only as good as their players.
Yep.
And when you have good ones, you're going to have success. When you have great ones, you're going to win championships. When you don't have either, you're going to be mediocre. When you have no players, you're going to suck. That's just the way it is. And it's even more obvious in football because football is not an acquired skill sport like these other sports are, okay? In basketball, you need to be able to shoot. You need to be able to pass and dribble. In hockey, same. You need to be able to pass and shoot. Lacrosse, pass and shoot. Baseball, you got to be able to pitch and have command and be able to throw multiple pitches. You got to be able to hit. Football is all about athleticism and toughness. That's it. It's about athleticism, toughness, and intelligence. You got to absorb more information in football than all those other sports combined. But at the end of the day, it's about players, and they need to win the offseason. If O'Brien's going to turn this thing around, he needs to win from January to June. That's when he needs to win. They need to win the offseason, not just in the weight room, but they got to win the offseason in the portal. They got to win the offseason in recruiting. If they don't improve the overall talent of this roster, he can move on from Will Long. He can move on from Tim Lewis. He can do whatever he wants. It's not going to matter. We identified this pretty early on that Castellanos, as good as he's been, and he was a nice fit for what they did last year, he wasn't going to be a fit in this system. And while he's had a decent year, that's proven to be true. So they've got to upgrade the talent. It's just that simple because the landscape in college football is changing now. And if you're going to be able to compete with a lot of these teams that are living in the portal, you've got to make sure you have the talent to do it. UMass picks up a big win over Wagner. Andrew, you're a UMass guy. Thoughts on the Minutemen beating Wagner 35-14?
I didn't actually get to watch the game because I was out in Rhode Island, but I was really happy to see the final score of that game.
It was actually 35-7. I gave Wagner an extra 7 points. My apologies.
But yeah, it was nice to see that final score after the game. They've had a really tough year. It's really it comes down to a lack of talent and poor coaching from just the overall season outlook right now. And I don't think the win really, not to discredit them, it was a great win, but I don't think that really lets them get by with the product that has been on the field this season and the past decade. um, but hopefully that move to the MAC next season helps. And I mean, you definitely want to see some changes at some point in some capacity that can really help turn this program around. Because for a while now, it hasn't been great at all, and they're having trouble recruiting talent and getting talent on this roster.
Do you think that a lot of that is due to just UMass being located in Amherst, Massachusetts? Do you think that hurts them a little bit from a recruiting standpoint? Because you hired Don Brown, you bring him back home. He's a Massachusetts guy, highly regarded, one of the best defensive coaches in the country, won a national championship as a head coach, or rather, I'm sorry, took them to a national championship as a head coach. He won a national championship as a defensive coordinator. But he hasn't been able to get it going here. And do you think part of the problem is the facilities, the location? Does that hurt him in recruiting?
Yeah, definitely the location. Well, it's really just a lot of close to home guys that come here, and just transfers that didn't really work out at other big schools that think that will try and get an opportunity here instead. But I do think it's more of a program issue as well. Just they haven't shown any indication of trending upwards, and there just haven't been any promising factors that can really entice recruits to come here. And overall, it's just really hard. And obviously, Coach Brown can help just from his coaching prestige attract talent, but he also hasn't really been a great game manager this year. I mean, we saw it. He almost blew the game against Central Connecticut, and I forget if it was one of the earlier games this season. I forget who they were playing, but it was really just poor game management, poor clock management that prevented them from getting back in the game. Trying to remember, but I just can't. I think it was the second or third game of the season. Just they couldn't do it. It might have been Eastern Michigan.
So, Andrew, let me ask you, because this win did nothing for me. They should have beat Wagner. Frankly, probably should have beaten them, by more than they did. I know they've struggled this year, but it's Wagner. That needs to be more of an emphatic victory, in my opinion. But, Andrew, let me ask you, is there, in terms of student buzz, is there any willingness for students to kind of get behind this program right now for any reason, or is it just sort of apathy around the campus?
Just hope. It's really just hope. And I mean, there has been an uptick from last season in students that are attending the games. They've been a lot more involved, but other than that, it's really just hope. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of people about the team on campus, and they don't trust the program to do anything really. Like there's no hope.
Well, I think you did make a good point, though. The move to the MAC should help.
Yeah,
definitely.
I was just gonna say that's the biggest problem. Well, one of the biggest problems is they haven't given the student body any reason to get interested or get behind the team either. So that atmosphere is never going to be enticing to other recruits. If they're there on a Saturday and there's the stadium's half empty or 3/4 empty. So it's all a snowball effect for UMass, and I'm not sure how you turn it around other than, having real conference games and, having those Tuesday night action kind of showcases on ESPN. But the lack of interest among the students, I think, is a huge problem just in terms of enticing people to be interested in the program.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's also another thing with the move to the MAC. I feel like that would spark new rivalries, and I think that's something that they lost when they moved to the FBS. Really, you can really debate that they shouldn't be in the FBS; they should be back in the FCS. But obviously, that's a huge change that they probably won't make anytime soon. And if they did, it's going to take a while. But I think they do get a lot of help moving to the MAC.
But do you really believe that this administration is putting their best foot forward to help this program? I've said for a long time, Andrew, that they botched the move up to FBS. They tried to play at Gillette in the beginning. They were hoping that if they played off campus in an NFL stadium, a la Temple, a la Pitt, that it would help them. It didn't. It only lasted a couple of years, and then they moved back to McGuirk full time. I feel like not only have they botched it, but their investment in the program has not been what it needs to be. You don't have an indoor facility. You still have the gaudy bubble that is an eyesore when you get anywhere near campus. McGuirk is just it is subpar. It's arguably the worst stadium in Division I FBS college football. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think the investment has been there. And I think that they could say that it has. They built a new football performance center and all these other things. But until you enhance McGuirk and make it a more suitable stadium experience, until you invest in an indoor facility, until you invest in making football a priority, it's not going to matter. Football can look, Bryant is a prime example of it. They have decided we're going to commit to all our sports, but we're going to commit to football. And we're going to let football be the vehicle that drives the athletic department. And it's paying dividends. I mean, they're in the CAA now. They're more nationally recognized. Their recruiting base is a national recruiting base. UMass can do the same thing. And granted, I know they're state funded, but I don't believe that this administration has put their best foot forward for UMass to be successful at the FBS level. If this were an FCS school, yeah, they'd be successful. Look at URI. They don't have great facilities. Their facilities aren't very good at all, but they're competing. And we're going to talk about them in a minute. But do you really feel, does the student body, do people around campus feel that the administration has actually put this program in a position to succeed?
No, definitely not. They're first and foremost a hockey team, a hockey school. They're going to invest in other
sports to me because they didn't
football.
even have hockey 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, if they did, they weren't relevant.
Yeah, they're going to invest in other areas of the athletic program before football, and there really hasn't been any indication that that's going to change. It doesn't seem like they have any real motive to invest in football other than just agree to deals to play Georgia
which
for a couple
amazes
million.
me because that amazes me what you just said, because they're about to play Mississippi State and Georgia in the next 3 weeks, and those two games are going to bring in a boatload of money for the athletic department. And money that the hockey program's not going to bring in. Let's be real here. I mean, college hockey is only big in certain pockets around the country. People outside the Northeast, Minnesota, and the Midwest don't care about college hockey. It's irrelevant. And then I'm not shitting on college hockey. I'm just being honest. But the reality is, you're counting on this football program to bring in revenue that's going to pay for a lot of these other sports. That's not revenue that the hockey program is going to bring in. It used to be a basketball school when I was a kid because they had success when John Calipari was there, and you had Marcus Camby and Lou Rowe and all those guys. But they haven't been a good basketball program in years. And Frank Martin's kind of in the same boat as Don Brown as he's trying to figure it out. But it's tough to do there. But I think there's a lot of factors for the struggles of the program. I think universally speaking, a lot of people thought going into the season that they could win 4 or 5 games, maybe be on the precipice of a bowl game. They're not even going to sniff that. They'll be lucky to win another game this year. And they're staring at 2-10. And while I don't think Don Brown will walk away from this, I do think he wants to see it through the MAC. I mean, what do you, if you're him, you're thinking to yourself, can I ever get it done here again? Is it possible? You have to question that if you're him now. So we'll see. Speaking of Division I New England college football programs, UConn picking up a 17. The Owls to fire Coach Mike Bloomgren yesterday. Hold on one second, gentlemen. All right, here we go. So anyway, UConn improves to 5-3. They host Georgia State on Friday night in the last game of their 6-game homestand. The remainder of their schedule is going to be on the road, but if the Huskies win on Friday night, they're bowl eligible, which, say what you will, and I know a lot of UMass fans like to compare themselves to UConn, but the reality is UConn is miles ahead when it comes to facilities and national stature, of course. the basketball programs drive that wagon. But big win for UConn nonetheless, and they're 1 win away from being bowl eligible.
Yeah, look, it's funny. Jim Moore actually talked today instead of his usual Tuesday with a Friday night game this weekend. They have senior night on Friday night because it's their last home game. And he said, look, it's different in football. And John, you can attest to this with high school senior nights. It's different in football because if you're not mentally engaged or in the right frame of mind, he said, not only can you lose the game, but you can get hurt as well. And I found that interesting and just sort of a different perspective on the whole senior night thing. He said, frankly, I wish we didn't have it. He said, I wish we just did it at the end of a year at the banquet, but he acknowledged, moms wouldn't be too happy with that, so they'll keep doing it. But it's an interesting spot for them because people are showing up. We just talked about no one showing up for UMass. People are packing the rent now. So that's going to be an emotional night down there in East Hartford. And look, it's a winnable game, but Georgia State, they smoked UConn last year, which is also something more brought up. So it's not a give me by any means, but it's good to see them kind of in this position again. I still think 8 wins at least is on the table as long as they get this one this weekend. You got UAB, Syracuse, and UMass to end the year. So Syracuse is really the most difficult game on your schedule remaining. They're one of the better stories in New England this year, but I am interested to see how they handle some pressure at home in this spot Friday night.
Yeah, it's like a complete flip from the two teams we just talked about, BC and UMass. They started off strong and they've maintained good play throughout the season so far. And like you just said, they have not too hard schedule coming up. They play UAB, like you said, and then Syracuse, which is definitely going to be a tough matchup. UMass, you can just put a W on that game right now. But yeah, they definitely got something good going there, especially if they can get a bowl game this year. That would be huge for the program. They're on an upward trajectory. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of Storrs, Connecticut.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think if they win Friday night, if you don't go 8-4, I think it's a disappointment. Syracuse is going to be tough to win up there, but you should be able to win at UAB. You should be able to win at UMass. So they can beat Georgia State on Friday night, win those 2 games. Now all of a sudden you've got 8 wins. 8-4 gets you to a pretty decent bowl. I mean, they're not going to be in a lower tier bowl. 2 years ago they went 6-6. If they find a way to finish, let's say, minimum 8-4, they're probably going to play in a decent bowl game. That'll bring in a decent amount of revenue. I think they'll travel well. The UConn fan base is used to traveling with the basketball program, so traveling to a bowl game won't be an issue for them. So I think if they can win Friday night, 8 wins is a possibility, and that would be one hell of a bounce back year for Jim Mora and this staff when you think about the coaching changes and the player turnover. But again, they've done a great job in the portal, man, and their NIL initiative, and our good buddy Amon Kidway can speak more to that. He's involved with Storrs Central. They do a great job. They do a great job of fundraising and raising money to bring student athletes to Connecticut, and it's proven to pay dividends. So we'll see. But, here's to the Huskies taking care of business Friday night against Georgia State and becoming bowl eligible. It certainly would be nice to see. Andrew, of course, on Saturday, you were at the URI main game. The Rams prevailed in this one. They are on the brink of winning their 8th game, which has kind of been the number they've been chasing. Seems like they've been 7-4 for the last 10 years, but the last 3 years they've been 7-4. This is an opportunity for them to get over the 7-win mark and to continue to stay atop the CAA standings. They've got Monmouth at home, which will be a tough game for them, but big win over a good Maine team that is 4-4 but has played well all year. Just some thoughts on that one. You covered it for us on Saturday.
Maine was definitely giving them some issues for quite a bit throughout that game. First quarter, they were up 7-0, and the second quarter, URI in the second quarter came back and was able to take the lead. But then heading into the fourth quarter, Maine tied it up. It was 14-14. Luckily, after a very slow start on offense, URI was able to make it a 2-score game by the end. But yeah, really good stuff from the defense, the URI defense. They had, I think, it was 6 sacks on UMaine, and they were getting pressure all day. And the DBs, they really showed out as well. Linebackers were great. And on the offensive end, Devin Farrell, their quarterback, he similar to what we saw this past Sunday in Pat's Jets with Drake May. They didn't respect Farrell's legs, and he was able to get 2 rushing scores using his legs, and also getting a couple first downs scrambling the ball. They were able to get a couple deep balls that put them in position to score, which were really nice. You do want to see a little better sequencing of drives and keeping longer sustained drives rather than it's third down and you just throw it up there and you guys get in the red, or you're in the red zone all of a sudden after a big catch. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty good win by URI. They've been doing great.
Andrew, it's funny. Coach Fleming talked today, and he talked about needing to sustain more drives regularly. But, John, you mentioned the 8-win threshold, and Fleming was asked about it today. That's always sort of the number they've looked at when thinking they might have a chance to end that 39-year playoff drought. And he said, look, I don't even know what the number is anymore because the CAA is so good. It's them and Richmond right now that are unbeaten atop the league, but you got Delaware at 4-1, I believe, in the conference, and then a crap ton of teams at 2-2. So with 4 games to go, that conference is still wide open. And look, they're ranked 14th in the country right now, but 1 or 2 slip-ups and everything could go, right down the toilet. There is no guarantee, even though they've had this fantastic start. It's, I believe, 5 straight winning seasons now under Fleming, and he was very proud of that when talking today, as he should be. But they're by no means a lock for the playoffs right now, and they know it. So they still need to take care of business. They still have to go to Delaware. They still have to go to Albany as well, and Bryant will not roll over against an in-state rival.
They actually have Albany at home.
They do. Okay, so I know that I know they have 2-2, I believe, on the road and at home the rest of the way. But either way, they know they need to take care of business going down the stretch, and that's sort of been the key, is focusing on the process, which Fleming has admitted as a staff they've sort of gotten away from throughout the past several years, and that's why they've had these slip ups and had that one game where at the end of the year you're looking at the schedule and saying that's the one that kept us out of the postseason. So great story so far, but they know the job is not finished by any means. But I do think this is a special year for them. Just the way they've won close games. Andrew, you mentioned it. This was either the 4th or 5th game they've come back and won in the 4th quarter. They're a late game team, which is a sign of a really good team as well.
And, of course, another big one this weekend is Harvard at Dartmouth. In many ways, this game could end up determining the Ivy League. Crimson are going to head up to Hanover with a 5-1 record. Big Green coming off a win over Columbia this week. They're 6-0. I mean, look, we're getting to the back end of the Ivy League schedule now. If Dartmouth wins this game, they're pretty much in the driver's seat to win the Ivy League outright as long as they take care of business down the stretch. If Harvard wins this game, it's going to be a free-for-all again, and we could be heading into the final weekend of the season with a share of the Ivy League title on the line.
Yeah, I was just going to say we might be looking at a 4-way this year. We had the 3-way tie last year, but I covered Harvard on Saturday. First of all, just a great day for that program. Legendary coach Tim Murphy was honored during the game and was out there for the coin toss. Had some time to catch up with him. Just an absolute legend in New England football, and it's ironic that his former best friend, Buddy Stevens, his replacement, Samuel McCorkle, is now standing in the way of Harvard getting another Ivy League title. So we've said this for 2 years now. What Dartmouth is doing, in particular what McCorkle is doing, given the situation that he was, coming into, it's one of the best stories, I think, in the country at any level. But their offense is phenomenal. Harvard's offense is phenomenal. I think that game is going to be a shootout. And you mentioned, we say this every week at this point. The Ivy League is the best league, maybe in all of FCS, besides the CAA. Competitive every single week, every single game, seemingly. This one is going to come down to that last week. At least I believe so. I do think Harvard wins this game this week. So Free for all is the right word, John. It's going to be a fight to the finish again this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Andrew, your thoughts on the Ivy League, if you have any?
I don't pay a ton of attention to the Ivy League, but Kevin kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I was going to say, I think it's going to be a complete shootout. Both their offenses have been really good so far. I think that game's going to come down to the fourth quarter. I think it's going to be a really good one to look forward to.
I think it's going to be a close game. I don't see a shootout. I think that Dartmouth's defense is pretty good. Offensively, that they're averaging around 24 a game. They're not exactly an offensive juggernaut, but that's not the way they're built to play. They're built to run the football and play good defense. And I think that if they can establish Q Jones in that running game early, I think that they'll have a shot. Either way, it's going to be a great game. And, of course, we'll have coverage of that for you on Saturday. And, of course, you still have Yale, who's in the mix at 4-2 as well. They are at Columbia on Saturday. So if they take care of business, anything's possible. So we'll see. Real quick, high school football, of course, in Massachusetts. Story of the weekend was CM's big 34-0 win over St. John's Prep. I picked the Prep. Egg on this guy's face. But CM running back Makai Dodd, the Boston College commit, very impressive win for CM. I think it's safe to say that the Knights are back.
Yeah, the worst part about it is we won't see that playoff matchup. But I don't want to get you going on that, but yeah, they're the best team in the state right now by far, I think. And as usual, DiBiase has a very, very skilled, squad, but I don't think that's indicative of what St. John's Prep is either by any means. Just a bad day, and I still expect Prep to be right there in the end in D1. But very surprising score. Not surprising how good CM is this year.
I don't have a ton of thoughts on high school football, to be honest. I haven't been keeping up a ton. But
we'll take your word for it. No, I listen, I was impressed by that score because to me what it says is that CM is back. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people questioned whether or not they were back this year. How good are they? They lost to Cardinal Hayes early. Didn't play St. Francis. We hadn't seen him for a couple of weeks. And then all of a sudden, all right, they beat Leominster. They beat New Bedford. But how good are they really? They still haven't played Xaverian in the Prep. We'll see how good they are in the next 3 weeks, and they beat both. So, and that Xaverian game could have gone either way in the end, but I think it speaks to just how good CM is. And, of course, we got a big one this week in the NEPSAC and the ISL Large. Tabor Academy beats Belmont Hill last week in a big win for the Seawolves. They're going to take on BBNN and Bull McCormick in a game that should determine the ISL Large, Kevin. It's going to be a big one. You're going to be there on Friday night for that one. I mean, probably the best game of the weekend in New England. I think that Choate Avon Old Farms in the NEPSAC can give it a run for its money, but this will be a big one.
Yeah, I was just going to say it might be tough to beat Tabor and Sebs and that finished a couple weeks ago. But you want to talk about a shootout, I'm expecting a ton of points in this game. Both of these offenses are phenomenal. You mentioned Bo McCormick. He's probably the best player in the state, or at least top 5 right now. And what Jeff Moore has done down at Tabor, again, that offense is humming. So might not only be the best game of the weekend, but one of the best games of the entire season in New England.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And, of course, our Craig Boland was down at Fairfield Prep on Friday night as well for FP and Bishop Henrican. Dominant performance by Fairfield Prep. They needed that because I think coming into the season, senior laden team coming off a tough year last year, I think a lot of people thought, okay, they could be pretty good. They didn't have that signature win, though. They ended up getting blown out by hand, pick up a big win over Bishop Henrican, who's the number 1 team in Rhode Island, and certainly a signature win for them. LaSalle comes to Massachusetts, picks up a big win over Barnstable. So a lot of good games this past weekend. There will be a bunch more good ones this weekend. And as always, we'll have you covered throughout the weekend in terms of high school football. All right, gentlemen, final thoughts here. Kevin, I want to start with you. Give me a final thought as we wrap this up.
I got 2 real quick. One college note we didn't get to. Holy Cross is now 3-0 in the Patriot League. Dan Curran has talked a lot this year about having a tough schedule early on and tough losses to URI, to UNH, to Yale, and of course to Syracuse. But they're in control of their own playoff destiny still, and his sixth straight Patriot League title is very much on the line. So he deserves some credit for what he's done with that squad, kind of, transitioning into a new phase. And then, as usual, we appreciate all of your support. This is our favorite time of year with, the high school season winding down, the playoffs starting, college sort of starting to wind down. And any support you can give us, hat, t-shirt, subscription, whatever it is, we appreciate it.
All right, Andrew, one final thought from you, my friend. Any thoughts? Patriots, college, you name it. Final thought before we wrap this up.
I'm going to bounce back to the Patriots. I'm just going to say one final thought. I wouldn't be too surprised if they start not racking up some wins, but I think it's very possible they can end up with 5-6 wins. I don't think the season's completely lost, especially if Drake May plays. I think they have a really good shot at beating the Titans this Sunday. And again, they face teams like the Rams. Obviously, the Rams, they got some offensive firepower coming back, but they also play the Colts. I think I'm just going to be honest. I don't know if they're going to be picking as high as we may think.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, when you look at their schedule, it's hard because you still got to play Buffalo twice. You still got to go down to Miami, which has been a house of horrors for them. But the Dolphins are 2-6. They're all of a sudden a non-factor. Who knows if Tagovailoa is going to play in that game? I mean, you hope he does for his sake. But yeah, they do have games that are going to be toss-up games here. You got Tennessee, you got Miami, you got the Colts. Arizona, as well as they're playing, you can go out there and maybe catch them on a bad afternoon. They could potentially win 5 or 6 games. And I think if you go 5-12, 6-11, it's an improvement over last year. And all of a sudden, Gerard Mayo, probably not a bad hire. I know a lot of people last week were quick to say that he could be one and done. I mean, there was one ridiculous report out there that he'll be gone from 48 hours, and I'm not going to mention the source, but they were never going to fire him. That was not going to be a thing. If they were to fire him, it would have been at the end of the season. It's not going to happen. I think to Andrew's point, they could now very well find themselves being 5-12. So who knows? We shall see. All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's episode of the New England Football Show. Andrew, I want to say thank you for joining us, man. We really appreciate it, and we appreciate the good work you do for New England Football Journal as well.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me on. It was a great time talking just football with you guys. Really appreciate the opportunity you guys gave me. Been having a blast covering games this year, and looking forward to more.
Yeah,
thank you.
We are as well. Thanks, brother. As always, I want to thank my partner Kevin Stone as well. All right, I'll be back with you on Wednesday night for the high school football preview show and the college football preview show. Until then, for Kevin, for Andrew, I'm John Serenitas. We'll talk to you next week. Peace.
See ya.